this is gonna get interesting. What's up everyone? Nick here, and today we're taking a look at the Nerf N-Strike Elite Battle Camo Edition Rough Cut 2x4 and the Nerf Rival Takedown XX800. Now, moving away from the freakishly long naming conventions, the original Nerf Elite Rough Cut was released in 2013, and this reskin, being part of the Nerf Battle Camo series, was released in 2018 as a Walmart exclusive. Meanwhile, the Nerf Rival Takedown was released in January 2020, which was just a few months ago to date this video. You see, I picked up the Rough Cut only a few weeks ago for the very first time. Meanwhile, I picked up the Takedown just a short amount of time after that, which means that my experience with these blasters is fairly limited, and what I'm hoping is that that lack of experience will translate to a fairly fresh take on these blasters. On top of that, I asked how people felt about both the Rough Cut and the Takedown just a few days ago on the Nerf subreddit, and the answers that I got were fairly interesting. Now, I do understand that it's going to be pretty hard to pick the better blaster out of these two without being subjective, but we're going to try anyway. Before going any further, they spin beautifully. So let's check out the blaster's ammo capacities. Both of them have a maximum capacity of 8 rounds. The Rough Cut will fire 2 rounds simultaneously, meaning you only get 4 shots. One thing I should add about the Rough Cut is that it is possible to single fire this blaster by simply holding down the trigger and pressing very gently to fire the first dart. However, it's extremely difficult to pull off. See, I was able to do it, although it took me an incredible amount of time to apply the right pressure. In normal situations, like in HVZ, you're not going to be able to just stand there and slowly apply pressure on the trigger until you get that first dart. So it's really not worth practical, and it's not something that's really worth talking about here, but I thought I should mention it since it is something that is technically supposed to be included with this blaster. And this differs a lot from the Takedown because the Takedown only fires 1 shot per action. It is possible to double prime the blaster, meaning you prime it regularly and then you hold down on the deprime button to be able to prime it a second time, getting 2 rounds in the chamber. However, this greatly reduces your range and accuracy. And that's without even talking about the actual ammo types for these blasters. Because on the one hand, the Takedown fires HIRs, or high impact rounds, or rival balls, or just balls. And on the other hand, the Rough Cut fires 50 cal darts. On top of that, the actual ammo types play a significant role in the way that the blasters are loaded. In the case of the Rough Cut, it's just your average run-of-the-mill front loader, and in the case of the Takedown, it's actually a really nice internal magazine, which you can just drop your HIRs into once you've accessed it with a single pump. Now, the very neat thing about these two blasters is that they're big enough to be a pseudo-primary, and they're also small enough to be a very nice secondary. On top of that, the blaster that is going to work the best for you is also going to depend on your playstyle and loadout. For instance, if you really like sticking to the same ammo type, then you might prefer 50 cal darts, or you might prefer Rival. Or maybe you like having a primary that is 50 cal and a secondary that runs Rival, or vice versa. It really depends on your style. Me personally, I really like using the exact same ammo type, because not only does it mean that I can switch from my primary to my secondary, but I can also reload from my secondary to my primary. The second issue we're going to tackle is spread. These aren't technically shotguns, but for the sake of the video, we're going to call them shotguns. The Rough Cut is actually quite good in that regard because it fires 2 darts per action without sacrificing any of the performance. Meanwhile, the Takedown can potentially fire 2 HIRs. However, it's due to the D-prime button, and it's not an actual feature within the blaster, so I tend not to count that, and it's actually technically just a single fire shotgun. And not only does the Takedown perform better than the Rough Cut, it actually has quite a bit more modding potential than the Rough Cut. When modding the Rough Cut, there are actually quite a few of the internals that need to be either replaced or reinforced to facilitate a performance mod without any breakage. But in the case of the Takedown, it's actually quite a bit easier, and not only that, but the performance boosts are quite staggering compared to what you would get from the Rough Cut. Now we're going to end with the ergonomics. Something that I find very fascinating with these two blasters is that they're actually very similar when it comes to their overall dimensions. They're about the exact same length, and they're about the exact same thickness. But this is where they differ. Now the main difference with these two blasters are actually their pump grips. On the one hand, you have the Rough Cut, which has a fairly narrow and fairly small pump grip, and it's actually very tricky to prime sometimes real quick. I have fairly small hands, and oftentimes my hand will actually just slip off the pump grip whenever I go to prime it. But it's not that bad of an issue, but when you compare it to the Takedown pump grip, my hand just sits right on this lip, and it's an awesome pump. The one thing I dislike about this pump grip isn't the actual ergonomics itself, it's really just the stiffness of the pump. It demands a lot of power to actually prime it back. On the way back, it's not that bad, but the initial strength required to prime it back is actually kind of tricky. And that's one of the problems that happens when you mod this blaster. It becomes almost impossible to prime. The one thing I should mention about the pump grip is that it's actually fairly short. It doesn't demand as much length to prime it, especially when you compare it to the Rough Cuts, which is fairly long. Now, what this allows you to do is to fire your HIRs at a higher rate than the Rough Cut because it's a shorter distance, meaning you can do it much faster than the Rough Cut. Now, there's one very last thing we have to talk about with these blasters, and it's really a defining factor to figure out which one is best. Sling points. As in, there are none. There are none on the Takedown. And you can't say that this counts as a sling point. I tried hooking up my slings to this, and it just gets stuck and it can barely move. This is not a sling point. What the frick, Hasbro? What are you doing? Can't even afford to put a sling point on this absolute boomstick of a thing? Meanwhile, this one has two on the handle and right above it, and it's a dream to sling. So yeah, no, toss this in the trash. We don't need this. We don't need this thing anymore. It's garbage. This is the winning blaster. Okay, I'm kidding. The Takedown is actually really good. I really enjoy it, but I also really enjoy the Rough Cut. I'm gonna switch between the Takedown or the Rough Cut depending on what I need. Do I need 50 cal darts and a spread, or do I need high performance HIRs in the form of a pseudo primary / secondary? And it also depends on whatever game style you're playing, because these can serve completely different roles, but they are kind of interchangeable, and that's what I really like about these blasters. Same, but different. And who knows, maybe I'll pick up a pair of these and paint them in a matching paint job. I think that'd be pretty cool, actually. You can absolutely switch between a Takedown and a Rough Cut easily because of their similar form factor, so you can put that in a sling, wait, correction, can't put this one in a sling, so you better be putting this in a bag or a drop leg holster. Just letting you know. Well, in my opinion, I think that these two blasters really deserve to be on the same echelon of really good blasters released by Hasbro. These things are absolutely awesome, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed that video and found it informative. All in all, that pretty much sums up all of my thoughts on these two blasters. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with some of my points, if you disagree with some of my points. And thank you so much for watching. This is Nick, signing out, and I really hope to see you in a completely different video. Peace.